The word now is that Congress is going to resume in about 40 minutes' time to resume this discussion on the basically a ceremonial confirmation of the vote of that the fact that Joe Biden won enough votes to become president. How important is it that this proceeds tonight in light of what's happened there?
Well, what it really does is send that signal that we will not be defeated by these protesters, that violent interruption to that process, which happened just as the voting, the counting had begun, will not upset the democratic processes. And as you said, this is largely ceremonial. It's not a big deal. It's just a day that you go through. But of course, this was made so by these protesters and of course fuelled vociferously by the president. And you only have to look at the language of his most recent tweet, where he doesn't blame them. He doesn't blame any of those supporters for what happened, the forcing their way into chambers, the death of a woman, it appears, a woman shot to death inside the Capitol, it seems. And his latest tweet where he says, these are the things and events that happen when a sacred landslide election victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away. So it's not their fault. It's the fault of presumably the Democrats involved in this grand conspiracy, of course, not proven in any court in the land. About 60 legal challenges failed. But his supporters, and this is the fundamental problem, his supporters really believe and can absolutely hold it as an article of faith that this election was stolen and that they are the ones that are protecting democracy. By storming into this building, trying to stop that vote and succeeding in interrupting it, they say that they are the ones that are looking after the Constitution of the United States and the will of the people, because they honestly believe, this is not something concocted, they honestly believe the president when he says this was stolen and I won the election.
Yeah, and just on that stand here, Phil, you were there in the lead up to the election. You've covered US politics for a long time. We know that this has been something that's been unravelling. You go back to the Obama presidency and the Republicans refusing to accept the legitimacy of that and the birther controversy that Donald Trump was a part of. You saw the other side, the Democratic side, protesting against the Trump presidency and the ongoing tensions around that. And now we go to a whole new level. So what does it tell us about the state of division in the country, the state of politics in the country, and questions, particularly now, I think, for the Republicans, as to how they position themselves, what next generation of leadership might look like? Is there a moment here now to distance themselves from Donald Trump? What's your read on all of that?
Well, the problem is that the Republican Party is beholden, in a sense, to Donald Trump. Why? Because he commands the support of tens of millions of voters. And if Donald Trump says a particular congressman or woman or senator from the Republican side does not deserve to be re-elected, they won't be, because he will control that percentage of the voters that would make the difference to whether they won or lost that election. And that is why, fundamentally, so many Republicans have either remained silent or have been enthusiastic supporters of the president. Now, is there a moment where it's just not tenable any longer for many Republicans to continue to support Donald Trump, or his brand of an interventionist brand of attempting to keep himself in power? That may have come a lot closer today for many Republicans. You've got Mitt Romney, of course, who's no supporter of the president, and this is not entirely surprising. But here's a tweet that he put out a short time ago. What happened at the US Capitol today was an insurrection incited by the President of the United States. Now, that's incredibly damning words, and that's perhaps something you might expect from the other side, but coming from one of his own, it's got even more power. Does that actually convert to a fundamental shift away from Donald Trump? Remains to be seen. But even if the Republican Party or elements of the Republican Party said, OK, this is too much for us, we're distancing ourselves, we're no longer supporting the president, he's still got those millions and millions of supporters. What does he do with them? Well, pretty much anything he likes, because they believe every word he says. I've been at many rallies and spoken to many supporters of the president, and believe me, when the president says black is white, they'll believe him. And there is no way that dial can shift unless it's the president himself who says, OK, time to move on, or maybe I did lose this election. He'll never do that. Therefore, he has this incredible power over politics. Even if he's not the president, which he won't be in 13 days' time, he still has the power to be the kingmaker and possibly even make a comeback in 4 years' time, or a member of his family or one of his close supporters.
And Phil, with this tweet that he's put out just in the last hour or so, basically celebrating what's happened today, surely there is deep concern about his state of mind, which there probably has been for some people for some time, but concern about what could happen over the next 2 weeks while he remains president. So what's the likelihood there could actually be a move against him by his own cabinet to remove him from the presidency, particularly taking into account what he continues to say and what we've seen over the last couple of hours?
That is a very live question. However, you would have to say highly unlikely unless something more extreme happens again, and that's perfectly possible in this febrile atmosphere. Because, of course, his cabinet, his appointees, and many of them, like Peter Navarro, people who absolutely have sworn by him, can concur with the conspiracy theories and say, yes, you were robbed, Mr. President. Are they likely to now turn around and say, OK, this is a step too far, you need to be removed? It's not likely, but it is possible. I think the other interesting question is Mike Pence's role now. Vice President, seen as a loyal deputy, a quiet deputy, who's now gone against the President's wishes in not trying to send the result of this election back to the states to reconsider, obviously in Donald Trump's favour. So he's now on the outer as far as Donald Trump is concerned. Donald Trump said at a rally a couple of days ago, if he didn't do what the President wanted, he'd like him a little less. Well, he'll like him a lot less, and his supporters, Donald Trump's supporters, will now see him as part of the enemy camp, perhaps part of the deep state conspiracy, as they see it, to oust the president and subvert the will of the people. So there's one little sort of caveat here that Mike Pence may have been a last resort for the president if, for example, he decided that on legal grounds he couldn't pardon himself for whatever he may face in the future. And the other possibility was he could resign just at the end. Mike Pence is president for a day or two and then does the pardoning. Well, if those two people have fallen out spectacularly now and are effectively in separate camps, that's a less likely scenario too. So, these divisions are not just Republican, Democrat. I think the Republican Party itself is probably the more fractured than it's ever been, tearing itself apart in a sense. You've got two elements to that party. The old-style Republicans, the sort of people that supported Reagan and Bush, and the new style that support Trump. And those two sides are irreconcilable, almost as irreconcilable as the Democrats and the Trump supporters. So you've just got fracture lines everywhere in the US at the moment. It's very sad to see. It's very hard to see where the reconciliation process comes, because fundamentally you've got to almost half the nation believing the president when he says this was stolen. Your nation has effectively been hijacked by Joe Biden. And if you fundamentally believe that, well, how can you ever then listen to Joe Biden when he says we need to heal this nation?
Can we really say that, though, that Phil, like half the nation believes it's stolen? Half the nation voted for Trump at the election. It was like 47% or so. There were tens of thousands of people at this rally saying it was stolen. But is it really the case that half the nation believes that the election was stolen?
Well, it's hard to determine actually what the actual figures are. I'm just extrapolating on the vote there, and certainly there'll be Republicans that voted for him that do believe that he didn't win the vote. That's for sure. But there is that core support. Perhaps 20, 30, 40 million.
Yep.
We don't know what that is. And that you don't need a demonstration of millions in the street to gauge necessarily people that do fundamentally believe that. I've spoken to many people that have that fundamental belief, but don't necessarily get involved in these sort of demonstrations. This is the extreme expression of that sentiment. And of course, it's not just in Washington, it's across the United States. It's now a case of, well, how else does this express itself? Where else does this take itself? And if this last-ditch attempt to change the result of that election doesn't occur, what do these people, particularly on the fringes, the extremes of these views, what do they do next?
So some of the quality, just to that point that Phil was making there, some of the qualitative polling after the election, which looked at the voter intention, what drove you to vote the way you voted, showed that around 8 out of 10, Joe, 8 out of 10 Republican voters voted for the Republican Party because of Donald Trump. Now, he was the factor that was driving the vote. So, you know, when Phil says half the country, a lot of people were voting for Donald Trump, right. Not just the Republican Party, but Donald Trump-led Republican Party. And that raises enormous issues for the Republicans, and it does go to those deep divisions. And when people want to believe what they want to believe, you end up with the craziness we've seen today.
Yeah. OK, Phil, thanks for having a chat to us. We'll leave it there for the moment. Phil Williams there speaking to us from Canberra.